When I'm out shooting street photography, I'm more likely to be using one of these ultra budget lenses than my lenses that cost thousands of dollars more. And that's because I think both the user experience of using these type of lenses, as well as the image character they provide, works really well for street photography. I also tend to use a lot of manual focus lenses for street photography, and this video is going to have a mix of both manual focus and autofocus lenses. And if you're somebody who's been afraid of manual focus up to this point, I'm going to tell you there's some really budget options in this video, a great place to start, and it's not nearly as hard as you think. I will put links to all these different lenses in the description down below so you can go down and see current pricing, what mounts are available on. I also have dedicated videos on most of these lenses, so if you're interested in one in particular, you can go down there, do a little bit more research by watching the full video. The other thing I need to say is, in full disclosure, these lenses at some point were sent to me by the manufacturers at no cost to myself. I've never been paid by any of these manufacturers. They've never sponsored a video, and they've never had any say in the making of my videos. And all the lenses in this video are going to be APS-C or crop sensor lenses. This is going to work on Sony, Fuji, Canon, Nikon, all of the mirrorless mounts, as well as Micro Four Thirds. The first lens we're going to look at is one of my all-time favorites for street photography. It is the TT Artisan 25mm f2 lens. And this lens is very, very cheap. I think it's under $70 right now. And it is a beautifully built lens. It's an all metal lens, and it has a really nice clicked aperture ring. I love clicked aperture rings for street photography. It is also a manual focus lens, but it is quite an easy lens to nail manual focus on. And this is a lens that gives you a really sharp center of frame with some sort of softer corners and sides of the image, and it gives a really interesting character to street photography. Being 25mm, I think it's about a 37.5 full frame equivalent field of view, and this is one of my very favorite field of views for street photography. I've got a dedicated video on this lens, and it is one of the most popular lenses on the channel because it's so cheap and it's so interesting, and it's just an absolute pleasure to use. So I think for people that are into street photography and don't have this lens, this isn't just an absolute no-brainer at the price point. And you're going to get a really well-built lens that gives you images that have really interesting character to them. Now, if you're afraid of manual focus, I'm going to bring in this next one. We're staying at under $100, and you've got a lens here, which is an autofocus lens. It's by Viltrox. They're calling it the chip lens. It's a 28mm lens, which is around a little over a 40mm full frame field of view equivalent. Once again, an excellent street photography focal length, right there in line with one of my favorites. It is an f4.5 lens, but the great thing about this lens is it's super small and it's autofocus. So for those people that are afraid of manual focus lenses, now you've got autofocus under $100. This is the cheapest autofocus lens that you can buy, and the image quality is quite good. It actually has an image that covers a full frame field of view, so it's a lens designed for full frame cameras. But the edges kind of get a little bit low contrast, and it can be a little bit messy in the corners. But shooting this on a crop sensor camera, you're going to get a very sharp image throughout most of the frame. The other thing I will say with this lens is sometimes if you've got light coming from the side, you can lose a little bit of contrast in your image. In editing, you just turn up the contrast slider a little bit, and you're going to get some great images. But if you want something small, autofocus, perfect street photography focal length, that is the Viltrox 28mm chip lens. Now, the next one, I'm going to bring these two in together because I think they need to be considered together. This is the Viltrox 25mm f1.7, and this is the TT Artisan's 23mm f1.8. You wouldn't need both of these. You would choose one or the other. Now, I really like the TT Artisan series of this series of lenses. They are the cheapest. They're cheaper than the Viltrox. It's a metal body, and it is a really well-built lens. Originally, when they came out, the Viltrox was cheaper and the TT Artisan was more expensive. Now that's changed. The TT Artisan is cheaper and the Viltrox is more expensive, and the Viltrox is a plastic body. The TT Artisan is going to give you more of a sort of vintage vibe to it. It's a little bit soft in the corners. You got the focus fall off. It is a look I like, but I prefer the 25mm focal length over the 23. You could go with either of these and be absolutely happy. Once again, this is just falling into that perfect focal length range for me, but 25 is just a little bit tighter, and so I do prefer that for street photography. So personally, I would take the 25 over the 23, but the 23 is cheaper, better build quality, and still a great lens, so you can't go wrong with either. So both of these are absolutely excellent options. Now, the next one is a bit of a funny one. I think not many people would have heard of this or seen these around. This comes generically labeled. It's in a few different brands. It is a 35 millimeter f1.6 lens. And originally the optics were designed for CCTV cameras. So they would just set the focus at whatever is in the scene that needs to be in focus, and then they would just leave it. Because it's a CCTV lens, the CCTV sensors are smaller. So as you get to the edge where you're shooting APS-C or Micro Four Thirds, which is a bigger sensor, the edges get kind of crazy and soft and blurry, but it is a super interesting look. And you're going to be able to pick up this lens for around $35 or $40 or something like that. So it is a super cheap lens. I will link all the different lens mounts in the description down below so you can find the one for your camera, because it is a bit of an odd one and it comes in all different brand names. But I'll search them out and put some links there. But if you want something super cheap that's going to give you an interesting street image, then there's no doubt this is a good one. And it's also surprisingly sharp in the center frame, and it's going to give you, a super interesting look out of a very inexpensive lens. And at that price point, it probably goes without saying that's a manual focus lens. Now, the next two are 27 millimeter f2.8 lenses, also super popular lenses. As you can see, one of the advantages of these lenses is that they are quite small. We've got a TT Artisan 27 millimeter f2.8, and we've got a 7 Artisan 27 millimeter f2.8. The TT Artisan is a little bit more expensive, but it has an aperture ring, and it just has kind of a really cool look to it, where the 7 Artisan is a little bit cheaper, and it's actually a little bit more of a clinical lens, controls flare, and it's a little bit higher contrast than the TT Artisan, but it kind of just looks like a block. It's nothing spectacular to look at. Both of them have the ability to update the firmware in the lens, so they are really technically quite advanced lenses for the price point that they're at. I think really it's going to come down to, do you want the aperture ring? Do you want the smaller size of the TT? Or do you want the slightly more clinical performance and the slightly bigger lens of the 7 Artisans? 28 millimeters is a little bit over a 40 millimeter full frame field of view. Once again, I think this is a really good one, and I think it's easy for new photographers to compose street photography at this 40 millimeter plus focal length, compared to like 23 millimeters, which is generally considered the standard street photography focal length on APS-C sensor cameras. So these are both good options, both very cheap as well. I think this one's only like $129 and this one's like $160, something like that. Now, if you are on a super tight budget, here's another great budget option. This is a manual focus, manual aperture lens, fully manual lens, super popular. They sell tons of these things. It's a 35 millimeter f1.4 by TT Artisans, and it really has that mix of a look between a vintage lens and a modern lens. Super, super cool lens. It's also super small, which I like, particularly for an f1.4 lens. And I think with lenses like this, sometimes people think, oh, if I'm going to get something that's got kind of that look, shouldn't I just get a vintage lens? And that's a fair question. But for me, vintage lenses need an adapter. They're going to be much bigger, and you can have all kinds of potential issues that you have with vintage lenses, like oil on the aperture blades or dealing with the gear sticking. This is a brand new lens. It's going to give you kind of a similar image quality. It's probably going to be cheaper, and it's going to come with warranty, and it's a brand new lens. So if you're not into the bargain hunting for vintage lenses and trying to find a good one that actually works, then this is an excellent option, and in general, it's going to be actually cheaper than the vintage lenses. It's also a super sharp lens as well, and I like that 35 millimeter field of view is a 50 millimeter full frame field of view equivalent. Also, I think this is probably one of the easiest focal lengths for street photography for new photographers. 35 millimeter on APS-C will probably be my recommendation if you have not done street photography in the past. Now, at that same focal length, we've got two more coming in here. These are autofocus lenses. They're going to be a little bit more. Once again, we're looking at the TT Artisan and the Viltrox next to each other, both 35 millimeters. The Viltrox is a 35 f1.7, and the TT Artisan is a 35 f1.8. The TT Artisan is a smaller, cheaper lens, which is going to give you a little bit more of a vibe in vintage, slightly vintage image quality. It's not like washed out by an old vintage lens, but it's got slightly softer corners and it's got a bit of a look to it, where the Viltrox is a bit clinical. I think between these two, it's personal preference and price. The TT Artisan is going to be cheaper, has got a all-metal body. The Viltrox is going to be optically more perfect when we're looking at shooting test charts, but it's a plastic body and it's going to be more expensive. Totally personal preference. I tend to lean towards the TT Artisan because I like that look, and it's a metal body, and it's cheaper. So that's kind of me. But I know a lot of people just want something that looks like a very modern, recent clinical lens. If that's the case, the Viltrox is definitely your option. It's a super nice lens. Now, here's one that's going to be a bit out of left field for most people. This is what they call the OREO lens. And don't dismiss it straight away. This is more than just a gimmick. It is a super fun and interesting lens to use. It's a 32 millimeter lens. And essentially what it is the optic from one of those disposable film cameras that we used to use all the time. They still exist, and they still make them, and they make this optic, and they put it in this plastic OREO looking lens. Now, if you go look online and look up OREO lens, you won't be able to find it. So I'll put the links in the description down below to where you can find it. It's around $20 or $25. It's a fixed focus, fixed aperture lens. You can't change the focus, you can't change the aperture, which sounds kind of crazy, but it's just like the experience of using a disposable camera. And the fun thing about this is it frees you up to just focus on image composition completely. So you don't have to worry about settings. You just put the thing in auto, and then you try to compose the image. Don't worry about focus. Don't worry about aperture. That's all set. And I think for a lot of people doing street photography, this is a perfect focal length, but it also takes a lot of the variables out of it, and it's just a super fun, creative lens to use in the wild. Also, because it's an f10, you get a very deep depth of field, and it trains your mind to think about what the foreground and what the background looks like, because you don't have that advantage of the faster lenses that go to, say, f1.4 or f2, where you can just blur out that background. Image composition in street photography, a lot of it is thinking about that subject in the frame and how it compares to the things behind it or beyond it. And by having a lens that basically has everything from 1 meter all the way to infinity being in focus, it really forces you to focus on that part of street photography. And because of that, absolutely love this lens, particularly for beginners, particularly at the price point, more than just a gimmick. Now, the next two, I think these are also good ones for new photographers, particularly shy street photographers. This is the Viltrox 56mm f1.7 and the TT Artisan 56mm f1.8. We're going to end up in a similar situation as the other comparisons. You're going to get a little bit more of a clinical look out of the Viltrox. You're going to get a plastic body, and you're going to get a more expensive lens. And the TT Artisan, you're going to get a metal body. You're going to get a slight vintage look to the image, and you're going to get a less expensive lens. So this is going to come down to personal preference. Both of these are the equivalent of an 85mm full frame field of view. And you're going to hear some street photographers say that's too long. That doesn't, that's not real street photography. You got to get right up in their face. I mean, that's all fine for them. But for somebody starting out and you want to capture really interesting, compelling looking images, I think this is an excellent starting point. And some of my best images have been taken on an 85mm full frame lens or these 56mm in crop sensor camera. And it really is a much more relaxing way to do street photography. You can just hang back, take a nice shot. Also, these lenses allow you to take really interesting street portraits where you open up the aperture as wide as it can go, blur out that background, and you just get this really interesting image. You also get more image compression, which means it makes the thing in the foreground and the thing in the background look closer together, and it cleans up your frame with a narrower field of view. So if you're starting out in street photography, you have a lot less to think about as far as the background goes by using these lenses. Now, I won't dispute that these aren't traditional focal lengths for street photography, but I think for somebody starting out, you can start with one of these, and as you get comfortable, you can kind of drop your focal lengths, go back to 35, maybe to 25 or 23. But I think these are great starting points, and you'll see the examples in the video, and that's what your photos are going to look like if you compose them in a similar manner. Now, this next one is one that you don't generally think about for street photography, but I think it is a pretty cool one. This is an ultra wide. It's a 10mm f2. Once again, it's a TT Artisan. Probably should say the reason you're seeing so much TT Artisan in this video is not because I've been paid by TT Artisan at any point in my life. TT Artisan kind of hits a real sweet spot between image quality and price, and most of their lenses have a little bit of a look to them still. They still have a little bit of a character that I like for this style of street photography. This one is a little bit cleaner. It can be a little bit softer at the corners. 10mm f2. It's an ultra wide. You're going to use this for environmental portrait, or when you're in a situation where you get a big wide field of view and maybe there's a single person walking across a scene or something like that. Lots of times in environments where you try to take a photo in a busy city or in a cathedral or something like that, and you take the photo and you keep looking, you're like, man, that just doesn't do it justice. That is not what I'm seeing. This is not nearly as epic as I'm experiencing in real life. It's almost because you don't have a wide enough field of view. And you'll hear people say that 50mm or 35mm is the equivalent of what the human eye can see. But if you look at what I can see right now, I can see all the way over here. I can see all the way over here. That's definitely not a 50mm field of view. 50mm field of view is going to be like this. So when you get that experience where you think, this really isn't doing justice to the scene that I'm in, it's probably because you're not getting that wraparound image. This is going to give you that wraparound image. And it's just a different style of street photography. But yeah, I think this is a really cool look. And I think for some people, this would be a super, super fun lens. Now, the next one is a 17mm f1.7 by TT Artisan, another TT Artisan lens. This is sort of a moderate or medium wide lens. I think this is a great travel lens, great when you want to get somebody in a scene and really show the environment around them. If you don't get too close to them, you won't distort their features. So it's a very good walk around, do everything snapshot style lens. I think it is a little bit too wide for like beginning street photographers. But if you're using it as a street lens and you're more traveling with people you know and you don't mind being close to them and you want to get a nice wraparound environment behind them, then I think this is an excellent option. And the next one is one completely out of left field. And this might be a love it or hate it thing, but man, it's such a cool lens. This is a 6.5mm circular fisheye lens. There'll be videos on this lens as well as most of the other lenses might have mentioned earlier. Make sure you check the dedicated videos. That's really going to help you make a better decision when thinking about which of these lenses is for you, because I really talk about what each of them are good for. This is going to give you a really cool street photography look where it looks like you're looking through almost like a peephole type image. In some situations, you can even see the inside of the lens, which gives you even more of that peephole look. But beyond that, you can actually remove the fisheye look. And I like to use the lens for astrophotography as well as day to night time lapse or astro time lapse. And being f2, it's exceptionally good in low light. And it's probably the sharpest or the best astrophotography lens that you can get anywhere near this price point. It also is an interesting one because it is so crazy wide. You can point it at something and you can have people who don't even think you're getting a photo or video of them off to the side, and they're in the video, and it is just like a really cool look, and you can totally tell that they have no idea that they're in the image, and why would they think so? I mean, this thing's so crazy wide. Most people have never seen anything like it. So yeah, super, super fun one. Now, this last one is one that I just decided to throw in because it is just kind of crazy and out there. It is basically like putting a telescope on your camera, and you wouldn't traditionally think of this as a street photography lens, but you can use this and get this crazy, interesting, compressed image that doesn't look like probably anything that you've ever taken before. And you can do it at a very low price point. You're gonna need an adapter on some camera systems, so I'll link the lenses I can find as well as the adapter. This is also a generically branded lens, which comes with a whole bunch of different brands on it, so I'll try to find the right ones and the cheapest ones and link it below. It's a 500mm f8 lens, which is absolutely crazy. And what it does is it gives you this incredible image compressed look. And that means when you have a telephoto lens, it brings the things in the foreground and the things in the background closer together. And if you've ever seen these images where it might be a picture of a person or a wolf on the top of a mountain, and then the moon looks like huge behind it, like it's like the person and the moon are the same size, that's with one of these super long telephoto lenses. And for most people on a budget, those lenses or a lens of that focal length is completely unachievable. But this thing is just like a cheap telescope, and it really gives you that image. And although it isn't the sharpest lens and it isn't the most high contrast lens, you can drag the images into editing. You can crank up the contrast and sharpness, and the images look great, particularly for social media. Also, a great double up for wildlife and shooting the moon. It is great for a whole bunch of different things, and it's super, super cheap. So one that I wouldn't discount just because it looks so crazy, and it's a 500mm lens, and you wouldn't normally think of a 500mm lens for street photography. Now, buying a new lens is only one way that you can improve the quality of your images, but you can improve it right now for free. I've just thrown a video on screen now. I think this is the best beginner tutorial I have ever done on photography. So if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out what settings to use at what point, check out this video. I think there's going to be some concepts in there you've never heard of, and I think I explain them in a way that even beginners can understand.